5 days in a row of fire. Workers of Russian ports ended up in a riot after massive drone attack. President Zelenskyy is in Saudi Arabia. Historical defense, great beautiful deal, is signed. The Kremlin is running out of money, literally. Putin is forcing his oligarchs to donate to his war to try to seize the Ukrainian Donetsk region. Ukrainian drones struck Russia's oil terminals in the Leningrad region, Ust-Luga and Primorsk, for the second time. Russian ports have been burning for 5 consecutive days. The earlier strike on Ust-Luga caused major damage. Multiple oil tankers, fuel storage tanks, piers, and processing facilities were destroyed. Last night, tensions escalated further. Harbor workers, many of them migrants from Kazakhstan, clashed with security after being denied access to their workplaces. The situation spiraled when a security vehicle drove into the crowd, intensifying the unrest. Ukraine and Saudi Arabia have a deal. Signing an agreement on defense cooperation, confirms Volodymyr Zelenskyy during his visit to Saudi Arabia. There are no details of the new deal disclosed, other than that someone might have called it big and beautiful. While President Zelenskyy noted that the document lays the foundation for further contracts, technological cooperation, and investment, as well as strengthens Ukraine's international role as a security donor. He also emphasized that Ukraine is now ready to share its expertise in countering drones and missiles with partners of Saudi Arabia.
We are ready to share our expertise in systems with Saudi Arabia and to work together to strengthen the protection of lives. Now into the 5th year, Ukrainians are resisting the same kind of terrorist attacks, ballistic missiles and drones, that the Iranian regime is currently carrying out in the Middle East and the Gulf region. Saudi Arabia also has capabilities that are of interest to Ukraine, and this cooperation can be mutually beneficial. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, President of Ukraine, on X.
The U.S. Department of Defense has used some of the European Pearl money reserved for Ukraine, redirecting it to other military purchases inside the U.S., according to a Pentagon memo to Congress seen by the Washington Post. Cracks are emerging in Allied support. According to 2 U.S. officials, the Pentagon has informed Congress it plans to redirect about $750 million from the NATO-backed Pearl program, funds originally meant for new weapons for Ukraine, to replenish U.S. stockpiles. One official noted it's unclear whether European contributors fully understand how their money is being used. In practice, funds intended for Ukraine's rearmament may instead support U.S. reserves, while Kyiv receives older weapons from existing stockpiles under previous assistance programs. What a resourcefulness! New low today sounds like, take NATO's money for Ukraine and use the way you like it. As it seems that this NATO is not a friend of the U.S. anyway. It's just some kind of a liability and should be treated as such.
I'm so disappointed in NATO because this was a test for NATO. This was a test. You can help us. You don't have to, but if you don't have, if you don't do that, we're going to remember. Just remember this in a number of months from now. Remember my statements. They have an expression, a great expression. Never forget.
The White House's arrogance goes not without consequences. After Trump's outrageous attempt to shift the responsibility for unblocking the Strait of Hormuz from himself, from his war of choice, to allies in Europe, as well as Japan, Australia, and Canada, and blaming them they are failed in being good, beautiful allies to Trump, the process of preparing for unblocking Hormuz mission did not stall, actually. The allies began preparations. It's just that the U.S. is not amongst allies anymore. This moment highlights a deeper erosion in transatlantic relations, specifically how U.S. actions are now perceived by its allies. The issue is not a rejection of the mission itself, but of Washington's approach. Allies did not abandon the goal of unblocking the strait. They moved forward without the United States. France and the United Kingdom are now leading a multinational effort, already joined by around 30 countries across Asia and the Middle East, including Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, Bahrain, and the UAE. Canada, which Rane declined a similar U.S. request, has also agreed to participate in the expanded format. On March 19th, representatives of the coalition held their first meeting in London and signed a joint declaration.
We express our readiness to join appropriate measures aimed at ensuring safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. We welcome the readiness of the countries participating in the preparatory measures. It is expected that another meeting between the military departments will take place this week with the participation of the chiefs of defense staffs of the states of the expanded group that have already signed the preliminary agreement. From the Multinational Unblocking Missions Joint Declaration.
U.S. actions are increasingly putting allies in a position where they have to deal with the consequences of Washington's own decisions. Whether seen as missteps or deliberate unilateral moves, the result is the same: growing frustration among partners. The recent controversy around the Pearl program has only intensified these concerns. Funds provided by allies for Ukraine were reportedly redirected to U.S. needs, without clear coordination, raising questions about transparency and trust. As details emerge publicly, the episode risks damaging the United States military and political credibility, reinforcing doubts among partners about the reliability of its commitments. While Trump reprimands NATO and goes even more infantile by promising to have his revenge in 2 or 3 months, Russia has begun delivering upgraded Shahed drones to Iran to help it to kill more Americans. As FT confirms, quote, Russia is close to completing a phased shipment of drones, medicine, and food to Iran, according to Western intelligence reports that detail Moscow's efforts to keep its embattled partner fighting. Senior Iranian and Russian officials began secretly discussing delivering drones days after Israel and the U.S. attacked Tehran. 2 officials briefed on the intelligence said the processing of deliveries began in early March and was expected to be completed by the end of the month. Asked about Moscow sending drones to Iran, Kremlin mouthpiece Dmitry Peskov said, "There are a lot of fakes going around these days. One thing is true, we are continuing our dialogue with the Iranian leadership. There are a lot of fakes going around these days, Comrade Peskov, because you are literally oozing them, and they are working quite well, as all NATO and the U.S. combined both just seem to learn nothing during the course of the war of Russian aggression in Ukraine. I mean it, nothing at all. Allies seem to ignore all of it for 4 years in a row. Strategy, tactics, experience, victories and failures of the Ukrainian army, all of that was taken for granted, as the war in Iran has clearly shown."
Frankly, I was just a little bit dubious in the beginning. It's a complicated system. We trained guys for a long, long time to be able to operate it. The Ukrainians put their best people against it and took to it like a fish to water. And in fact, we learned from some of their employment techniques right now.
But it is good to know the situation is changing for the better. To some extent at least, Russia is likely to focus on attacks on energy infrastructure in the event of an attack on the North Atlantic Alliance. According to the annual report of NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte for 2025, which is why the alliance is stepping up training in this direction. The annual report with the main conclusions and achievements for 2025 was presented by the NATO chief on March 26th. A Radio Liberty correspondent in Brussels reports.
Russia's military aggression against Ukraine has demonstrated that energy is also likely to become one of the main targets in the event of any attack on NATO. The alliance is identifying lessons learned from Ukraine while strengthening training, exercises, and coordination on the protection of critical energy infrastructure. Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO.
Putin is reportedly pressuring parts of his oligarchic circle to contribute financially to the war effort as the costs continue to mount. Some prominent figures, including Suleiman Kerimov, who has signaled a contribution of around 100 billion rubles, and metallurgical tycoon Oleg Deripaska, are said to be among those participating. At the same time, Russia's war spending remains under strain, particularly amid ongoing pressure on its oil infrastructure from repeated drone strikes. Despite these challenges, Moscow continues to pursue its objectives, with Putin maintaining a firm stance and showing no indication of scaling back his ambitions in Ukraine, including claims over the Donetsk region.
After the talks in the USA, there is no real movement toward peace because Russia is not showing readiness for diplomacy, stated President Volodymyr Zelenskyy after receiving a report from the Ukrainian negotiation team that returned from the United States. The geopolitical situation has become more complicated due to the war with Iran, and this strengthens confidence in the Kremlin, believes the president of Ukraine. He added that Russia is preparing to strike Ukraine using up to 1,000 drones.
We
will respond to every one of their attacks. We're speaking about this completely openly. Russia, aside from the pressure, and as we can see, the pressure on Russia from the world is actually decreasing. I'm not talking about the reasons right now. but we can see changes in sanctions policy. That's why, unlike everyone else or many in the world, Ukraine has its own sanctions. These are them. These are our responses. They must feel the pressure. If Ukraine doesn't respond to their strikes, Russia will simply continue. It won't even consider a pause in this war.
Representatives of the USA, Russia, and Ukraine held 3 rounds of talks during the winter. On 21st and 22nd March, delegations from Ukraine and the USA met. The parties discussed humanitarian issues and the creation of strong and reliable security frameworks for Ukraine, explained U.S. Special Representative for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. As for security guarantees, the American side is ready to finalize them after Ukraine agrees to withdraw from Donbas, reported President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
You must understand that the withdrawal of troops from Donbas, besides the fact that it is wrong, immoral, and so on, but withdrawal from Donbas today means weakening Ukrainian defense. Exactly so. Russia always has one more step. For example, nuclear weapons, which they constantly talk about, threatening the whole world. And every time in a stalemate situation, at some point they issue such a message. What if? So tell me, why would they not start the war again on some new terms, some additional ones? And they will tell the whole world, look, if it's a no, then we will be able to use this weapon. And we are not protected from this.
At the same time, Volodymyr Zelenskyy suggested that Russia is counting on U.S. fatigue from the negotiation process and a change in Washington's priorities. According to him, the international situation, including tensions in the Middle East, affects the approaches of the American administration. Meanwhile, the president of Finland stated in an interview with the Norwegian publication VG that trilateral format talks have exhausted themselves. At the same time, Europe has gradually taken on greater responsibility and is playing a more prominent role in the further development of events in Ukraine.
We understand the Russians' negotiation tactics well, and I believe that Ukrainians trust the European countries that strive to provide them with maximum support. But the main problem here is that I do not believe Russia wants peace. Therefore, the most important thing for the future is to increase pressure on Russia. But unfortunately, considering the war in Iran and the Americans' decision to ease sanctions on the sale of Russian oil, the situation is developing not as we would like. Alexander Stubb, president of Finland, in an interview with VG.
Without war, Russia will quickly turn into an outsider on the world stage, which is why it is interested in continuing hostilities, believes advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine, Mikhailo Podolyak. He emphasized that Moscow and Kyiv pursue different goals in the talks. Ukraine wants the quickest possible end to the war and a just peace with reliable security guarantees. Whereas for the Russian Federation, it is beneficial to prolong the conflict in order to remain a country that can influence something on a global scale.
We understand that fair conditions mean deoccupation and the aggressor paying the full price for everything it has caused to the country it attacked. But a relatively fair formula is the one proposed by the president, stopping the active phase of the war. We stand where we stand, monitoring missions. And basically, the core in all this is security guarantees. That is, what will clearly fix the impossibility of repeating such a war. What does this mean? It means that Russia must understand that if it tries to violate the same ceasefire, a collective strike will be delivered at that moment.
Earlier, the president of Ukraine repeatedly stated that the most sensitive issues, including territorial integrity, security guarantees, and the situation around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, should be discussed exclusively at direct talks with the participation of the leaders of Ukraine, the USA, and Russia. Moscow is still rejecting this possibility, continuing to attack Ukraine. In particular, the Russian army has intensified ground combat operations along the front line. At the same time, it carried out another massive strike. During the 23rd and 24th of March, Russia launched almost 1,000 drones and 34 missiles at Ukraine, reported by Kristina Dombrovska, UATV News.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next updates.